there is nothing, I think, in the range of possible Western reactions that will persuade President Putin to withdraw from Crimea. That's not going to happen. I think the focus of all our efforts, whether they are in national capitals, whether they are in the UN Security Council, or at the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, an organization which is often forgotten in this kind of affair, or with EU foreign ministers, the focus has to be on not allowing this crisis to turn into hot war between Ukraine and Russia, because that would change things enormously and much for the worse.
So should the world community, should Ukraine just shrug its shoulders and say, OK, Crimea, it's lost?
Well, Ukraine is never going to shrug its shoulders and say Crimea is lost. The only point that I am making is that I cannot think of any pattern of sanctions available to the West that will persuade Putin to get out of Crimea. Rightly or wrongly, it is too important to him and to Russia's national interest as he sees it. So there's not much point on wasting a vast amount of effort on the past. What we should be concerned about is a future which looks increasingly dangerous now that the Russians have issued this ultimatum, if this is confirmed, to Ukrainian forces holed up in their garrisons. The Russians have a historical tendency to overreach. This looks like Putin overreaching. He already has the Crimea in his grasp.
And if it does come to hot war, to use your phrase, what then will the response of the international community be? Surely it just cannot stand by and see Ukraine more or less taken apart.
Well, one thing I don't think is going to happen is that any Western government would be prepared to argue for a military response to the Russians. I do not see any combination of military forces, whether from the United States or from NATO as a whole, going into Ukraine to fight alongside Ukrainians against the Russian army. We would be then one step away from a nuclear exchange. That is not going to happen. The only range of responses which I think may give Putin pause for thought from doing anything worse than what he has done already, although one can understand why he has done it, is some range of economic measures. Some of them will be self-inflicted, as we've seen what has happened to the ruble and to the Russian stock market. Others could be inflicted by the Western powers. And I think at the core of this, there has to be a real close understanding between the Germans, the French, the British, and the Americans. And don't forget, Britain and the United States are two guarantors of Ukraine's independence and integrity. These four powers have to agree on what is done next, and then others will follow.
You don't mention China in that. Do you
no,
think
I don't.
Do you think there is any possibility that you could bring China into that agreement with the United States, France, and Germany, and the United Kingdom?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't see the utility of doing it. And number two, I don't see the Chinese volunteering for a job which they would find, I think, extremely difficult and awkward and distasteful. So I think I would rule out China from this unless they happen to volunteer for a role, which I think is most unlikely. Don't forget that when I say that Britain and America are two of the guarantor powers of the Ukraine's integrity and independence, this goes back to the so-called Budapest Memorandum, if I remember rightly, of 1994. So we do have a we the Brits have an historical role to play here. And we have to use a combination of stick and mediation as a way of ensuring that Putin doesn't go further, either through attacking Ukrainian garrisons in Crimea or moving into the eastern and Russian-speaking areas of Ukraine to the north of Crimea.